Hi, I'm Cameron.
And I'm Hayden.
And this is
Until the End of Crime. Cameron, what's your experience with BDSM?
I don't really have personal experience with BDSM. I have an awareness that it is a community that sometimes in a true crime atmosphere. This is an atmosphere true crime is. What's the word I'm trying to find? I guess context works.
I'm bad at words right now too.
In a true crime context, sometimes BDSM gets blamed for people's deaths, or sometimes people claim that they are interested in BDSM, but they don't actually follow the rules. I understand that it's a very regulated, rules and boundaries and mutual respect are very important in BDSM. And I know that there was a lot of issue with the 50 Shades series, the way that it portrayed quote unquote BDSM. But
BDSM stands for bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism, right?
Those words do sound right.
They sound right. Are they right? I don't know.
I think so.
Listeners, you can write in if we're wrong.
I know that SM is sadism and masochism.
And the B is bondage. Right? I just assumed that D is domination.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So I personally don't. The way I set that up makes it sound like I have some crazy BDSM story personally, and I don't. The most I know is I used to talk to someone who was into pup play, and they would ask me to do things like tell them to go get the ball. And, that didn't go anywhere. That did not go anywhere. If we talk about the conversation you and I had before recording, I'm very good, or I was very good at knowing when something was going to work and not going to work. And so I dipped out of that pretty quickly. You ask me to play fetch with you, I'm probably not going to stick around.
We're not kink shaming, but we do have and understand our own boundaries, right?
Yeah, I've got my own stuff. I've got my own shit I have to unpack. I'm not going to treat you like a dog, or as you'd like to think of it, as a pup. So, do you know what it felt like to be asked to throw a ball so they could play fetch?
I do not know that, how that would feel. No. I can maybe try to imagine, but I think what I'm having an easier time imagining is you reacting to that.
I was like, what? Excuse me? You want me to do what? Call you what? Okay.
Look at the time. Gotta wash my hair.
Yeah. He was into many things that I was not, never was. Never say never, but assumably never will be. And so
Hey, to be fair, that was before you were a dog person.
It was before I was a dog person, and still, as a dog person, never, ever. When we talk about BDSM outside of that personal glimpse, I think one of the things that sticks out to me is kind of what you were just talking about. BDSM.
Talk about pup play.
Is it Molly or Jenny?
That's Jenny.
When we talk about BDSM, I don't want to pretend like I'm an expert. I'm not. A sex therapist, I am not. What I can say is that I think oftentimes it's portrayed as being well regulated, and maybe it is. But I feel like, and it could just be, thinking in terms of heuristics or bias. I hear a bad story about BDSM gone wrong, and so I assume all BDSM goes wrong in that way. I think that there are such fine lines of control and expectations that it would be very easy for someone to become either physically or emotionally harmed if great care is not practiced.
I do have a story.
The dominant partner is not mentally well and does not understand consent and boundaries.
Yeah, so I knew someone who had a partner that enjoyed being choked.
Sorry, I'm not trying to laugh. I feel like this is going to go somewhere really bad.
And basically wanted to be choked until lost consciousness, right? Until, and so this person I knew obliged, but was not really comfortable with it, which is why I don't think that what I'm talking about really can be categorized as true BDSM.
Right.
And there was one time where this person was so insistent that it continue that this person was concerned after passed out that they wouldn't be able to revive this person. Like,
that's terrifying.
Yes, terrifying. So I think that you're talking about the portrayal of BDSM, and I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding and misconception surrounding it, which is why I think it is. Are you serious?
Talk about pup play.
Which oh, these dogs are gonna kill me. Which is why I think that it's very important for people who are a part of the BDSM community to make it clear that those types of situations aren't actually classified as BDSM because there's a lack of mutual agreement in the situation. Like, everybody participating has to be on the exact same page, and they have to share a level of respect and understanding. And I think that somebody would probably consider the story that I just said like an example of BDSM when you talked about it potentially being something that would be physically harmful. But I think, because neither one of us are experts, right? Like you said, you're no expert.
We're no sexperts.
That either. Yeah. I think that it is important to, like, I guess, tread lightly over what is categorized as BDSM and what isn't, since we aren't super informed.
Right.
Educated. But what I do understand of it is that a lot of things are called BDSM that don't actually meet the criteria of BDSM because people just kind of think of it as, I don't know, something kinky or something, I don't know, othered probably is the best word.
But I do think choking is a form of BDSM.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure that it is part of it, but I think that I think really what the BDSM community, because I remember reading a lot of stuff when 50 Shades was really popular, is that both parties need to have had a conversation where they really truly understand, like, the boundaries, the limitations. There is a safe word or some sort of signal that this is too much, and the other person has to respect that immediately.
Yeah.
And that's also why I wanted to talk about the story that I told you, because the quote-unquote dominant party in that dynamic was not comfortable with the situation, which is why I don't think that that is, while choking may be BDSM, I think that because one party was almost acting outside of their own boundaries, it's not a good example of appropriately practiced BDSM. I don't want to say appropriately because that sounds like I'm passing judgment,
it's complicated, and we're not judgmental people for the most part. And so, especially not when it comes to kinks, I don't think, not my business, not my concern, not my care. I think that there is a psychosexual component to BDSM, and I think I would just recommend caution. Because what thrill or past trauma are you living out again in the hopes that you can correct it? And that is one of the things that I am not a sex therapist. I am not specially trained. But one of the things I have seen before is someone trying to almost reenact a trauma they experienced with the hopes of changing the outcome. Mm-hmm. And almost...
Or feeling more in control over the situation.
Yes. And gaining back some of that mental real estate from the experience. Yeah. And so I would say BDSM is something I think everyone should have a therapist just like they have a doctor. But I know that's not the case. And so I would never yuck another person's yum, but I would exercise a level of introspection before you say, "Daddy, choke me." Maybe ask yourself, why am I saying "Daddy, choke me"?
So I'm just going to piggyback in some information that I am fairly certain is accurate, but it wasn't like a focal point of my studies. But once a psychosexual connection has been made, it's almost impossible for it to be untangled or undone. It might be impossible for it to be undone. And in some cases, maybe in all cases, this is how informed I am, that is a requirement for that person to be able to climax, or to be sexually aroused, or to be sexually satisfied in some other way.
I think you talked about that all the way back in episode 12 when we did the murders at Alpine Manor, because at that point you talked about psychosexual connection and how it was possible that, and I can't recall their names at this time, but that psychosexual connection was so untetherable that it wicka 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 scratch that
short-circuited.
Yeah, that it made their relationship dynamic all the more complicated. And so you're jogging my memory. I remember now from what you said before.
And I think that it also usually requires some level of escalation, which is why it can be very, what's the right word? I guess dangerous in some instances. So my friend, she had she had a situation similar to the one where you declined the pup play, knowing that was not for you. Mm-hmm. I think that she was asked if she would participate in scat play.
Scat?
And she knew that was not for her. No,
we're talking scat. Philadelphia Steamroller, Alabama Hot Pocket.
How do you know names?
Rusty Trombone.
Oh my god. Jesus. I just feel like you're putting words together.
I had an Urban Dictionary phase.
I don't even want to. I have heard of Alabama Hot Pocket before, but I don't want to know about Rusty Trombone.
Scat play is so gross. Listen, sorry, I'm yucking a yum. Scat play is fucking gross. And no, I shouldn't say that. Scat play.
But isn't that, like, socially, I do think that is not a hot take.
No, I think most people would agree to that, but I don't want to shame anybody who's like, poop really gets me going. Right. I don't want them to feel that way.
Yeah, this will be the first time that they've heard that society thinks of poop as disgusting.
I know that people pay good money to see someone shit, and I think that's so wild. I think it's weird to pay people for pictures of their feet. I think it's much weirder to pay them to watch them poop. Like, you want to see them defecate and then get a close-up of the turd. And
but get your bag.
Get your bag, I guess. I'm not shitting for anybody on command. I don't care if I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on. This is truly where society is failing. This is the crux of the problem. People are paying to watch people shit. The absurdity. I can't even believe we're having this conversation. I hate that you brought up scat. I hate that I'm sitting here and I know what scat is. I hate that I know that people pay for scat. What is it's shit. It is feces. It is going to make you sick if you interact with it. Start with pink eye and end with H. pylori. You're doom.
Regardless of whether or not poop.
How dare you? How fucking dare you?
Regardless of whether or not poop is something that you get sexual gratification or arousal from, it is important that you close the lid of your toilet before you flush it so that you don't get poop particles on your toothbrush or any and everything else in your bathroom.
My towels hang in the open air. I don't use a fresh one every day.
Same.
And the thought of flushing my toilet with the lid open and poop particles getting on my towel, which I'm then going to rub my face with, is so upsetting.
It is the toothbrush for me.
The toothbrush, absolutely. Like Jasmine Master says, you can't smell that. But why do you think there's a lid?
What other purpose does it serve?
Right. You know what? I don't want to talk about poop anymore. I'm done. I'm pooped out. Double entendre.
Sorry.
Okay. As we exit BDSM, I guess let's prepare to go back into it. I need our sound editor to pull up this 911 clip and play it. Sound editor, are you out there? Are you anywhere?
I don't think you understand the limit of my capacity. You are suffering some delusion in which we have a sound editor that is actually qualified to do the job.
You managed to put the music at the beginning and the end, and that's more than what I feel like I've accomplished, so... Okay. October 10th, 2019, Shiawassee County, Michigan. James Carlson, a 48-year-old man from New York, had traveled to Michigan to meet a man for a consensual sexual encounter arranged...
A consensual? A consensual sexual?
Oh my god, I should have practiced some tongue twisters before I started today.
Red leather, yellow leather.
Red leather, yellow leather. Red letter, yellow letter. Sally Sue Slaughter caught fire at the slough. Seashells down by the seashore. A consensual sexual encounter arranged online. This sexual encounter ultimately ended up in a 911 call. On the 911 call, you hear James say, "I've never had anything like this happen. I don't know if he drugged me. I don't know. I woke up in a fucking basement, okay? Chained in a basement with a leather thing around my ankle. And I cut it with the butcher knife I have in my fucking hand. Excuse my French."
No, hold on. Where did the butcher knife come from?
Well, first off, I haven't gotten there.
Yeah, I'm sure some of these you'll answer and some of them you won't. But, that's already given me some... Is somebody dead?
No one's dead. Yeah.
No one's dead?
Maybe never. I don't know.
Chained in a basement.
On this 911 call, you can hear just how panicked Carlson is. Also, what's weird is that he has a southern accent, or almost kind of southern, and he says sweetheart. And it's odd to me because he's from New York, but that doesn't mean he's originally from New York.
It's true. And being from New York doesn't mean that you're from New York City.
Right. Carlson told dispatchers that he had met this man at a bus station in Flint, and after having a soda, he woke up in his basement, chained by his ankles, with a leather strap. He said he used a knife that he found to cut himself free. When Michigan State Police responded... Go ahead. I see you shaking your head.
No, you go ahead.
When Michigan State Police responded, they located Carlson. He was shaken, but adamant about one thing. He did not want to pursue criminal charges. He just wanted to go home. No arrest was made, and the case was closed. Carlson goes on to elaborate that, and this is from the reporting from Detective Viviano, who actually responded to this call, that he did not want to press charges because he went there voluntarily. He engaged in this sexual situation voluntarily.
Did he?
Not being drugged. But there is an element, and one of the reasons I asked about BDSM is there is an element of shame around kink play. There's an element of shame already with being a queer person, but on top of that, the shame that comes with BDSM activity, I'm sure had something to do with him not wanting to pursue anything further.
Was he really concerned that he had been drugged, or was that part of the...
I listened to the 911 call. He was terrified.
So unless he consented to being drugged, he did not consent.
I mean, we know people don't press charges all the time.
No.
Even though they were harmed.
I think a lot of times, especially if there is some sort of sexual element to the case.
Mm-hmm.
Rape is underreported. And then we know that most statistics are talking about, I would say that minority groups are less studied and less reported on when doing studies about like things like what is underreported, if what I'm saying is making any sense.
Yeah, I think that it's already kind of a double-edged sword for queer people to reach out to police for assistance, especially in instances where bodily harm or bodily autonomy might have been violated, because so often police misunderstand queer relationships to begin with and have an implicit bias against queer people. And so to have to go through the rigmarole, the emotional tumult of having these conversations with police officers and explaining, oh, well, we did meet on such and such app. The sex was anonymous to a degree. We did agree to participate in BDSM to an extent. Makes it very easy for authorities to kind of brush off. Oh, this was BDSM gone wrong. This is just two queer people, two gay people, two queer men engaging in an activity that got too real for one of them. And the level of stigma that complicates and compounds that feeling, that experience, can be really pervasive and really preventative from wanting to take any kind of steps forward, especially in rural areas. And this happened in rural Michigan.
Yeah.
Did that help at all? Did that say anything?
Yes, I do believe there were words in there. Yeah, I mean, when I'm talking about minority groups, obviously I'm not just talking about LGBTQIA+, and I think each group has their own reasons for not calling the police for help. I was also just saying that when we talk about things like sexual assault being underreported, I think that there are a lot of crimes, specifically in minority communities, where it's underreported because they don't want to have to deal with the police and whatever that dynamic looks like with their community, in addition to what they're already dealing with.
Right. I hear that. I understand that. Thank you for the further clarification.
You're welcome.
A little over a month later, on November 25th, 2019, another call came in. A neighbor of the same man, Michael Parks, reported a different person on his porch. This man was wearing a leather kilt, covered in blood, and screaming for help. The man was grasping Parks's arm with what he described as deathly fear, yelling, "Help me, keep him away, he wants to hurt me." Moments later, the man he was fleeing from arrived, also wearing a leather kilt, shirtless in 40-degree weather. Police arrived within minutes.
40-degree Fahrenheit?
Yes. Important distinction.
I don't really care to get into why that is important, but but it is.
Bing, bang, bong.
Because 40 degrees Celsius, which is, I think, what most of the world uses, is like 80-something degrees Fahrenheit.
You know, I think there is so much to love about the metric system. I feel like to describe the temperatures in which we exist in Fahrenheit makes so much more sense than centigrade. But what do I know? Not centigrade. Celsius? Is that referred to as centigrade?
I don't know. Because I've used them interchangeably, and I was told to just say Celsius. I was like, okay, sure.
Well, I don't live in the UK, so centigrade.
I think that you're saying that because that's what you learned and understand.
Okay, but what is the variance in degree when we talk about Celsius compared to Fahrenheit? Because to
1.
me,
there's like, you add a certain amount and then it's 1.8 in addition to that. It's like 1.8 times whatever. I hear you, I understand, but to say that the freezing point is 32 degrees and the boiling point is 212 degrees, when in Celsius, the freezing point is 0 and boiling is 100, if we just zoom out a little bit, that one does kind of make more sense.
it does for the grand scheme of things, but when we're just talking about humanity and our everyday existence, and oh, what temperature is it outside?
It is more nuanced in Fahrenheit. And so, like, here, when they're like, oh, 42 degrees, and I'm like, there are several degrees within that 42 degrees. And let me tell you, as somebody who was born and raised in Texas and lived there for the first 36 years of my life, every degree matters. Every Fahrenheit degree matters.
Makes a difference.
Yeah. So I hear you. I don't disagree.
Right.
I mean, there's a reason that I'm not still, like, I still have everything on my phone set to Fahrenheit. I'm not going to switch to Celsius, probably. I just have enough of an awareness that I'm like, yes, 18 degrees. That converts to a degree in Fahrenheit.
40 degrees Fahrenheit weather. Police arrived within minutes. Again, this victim declined to press charges. Again, no arrest was made. In both of these instances, these men escaped from the basement of this home and were found screaming in different states of disarray down the streets in this kind of rural area. Really, it's hard to even call it a neighborhood, but imagine a rural Michigan backdrop. Schwartz Creek, Michigan is a small and rural suburb of Flint, Michigan. It's the kind of place where Christmas is a quiet affair, centered on family and tradition. On Christmas Eve 2019, the Bacon family was preparing for their annual holiday breakfast, a gathering they expected their 25-year-old seven? Is that what I said?
That is what you said, yeah.
Expected their 25-year-old son, Kevin.
Are you sure it's not Christopher? Christopher Phillip?
Huh? Christopher who?
Christopher Phillip.
No.
Chris P. Bacon?
Stupid.
Oh.
No, their 25-year-old son, Kevin.
Their 25-year-old Seven, I know. I heard you the first time.
To attend, as he always did. Kevin Bacon was a hairdresser. I know. Googling more shit on Kevin Bacon got kind of ludicrous.
It just feels like we're 1 degree at this point.
Kevin Bacon was a hairdresser, a student at the University of Michigan Flint, and by all accounts, a vibrant and beloved presence in the community. At approximately 4:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, he was at the home he shared with his best friend and roommate, Michelle Myers.
Not Kira Sedgwick.
They're lovers. They're married. This is his bestie.
They
Also,
Kevin
Bacon, this Kevin Bacon is gay. Do what?
So they can be besties too.
They could, but they're not. Kira Sedgwick is so much cooler than Kevin Bacon.
No word on if the 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon is in Celsius or Fahrenheit.
Wild how I'm going to face jokes like this all story long.
No,
all
I'm
case
done.
long, I'm going to hear
done.
crispy bacon, Celsius degrees because Kevin Bacon, how many degrees of separation?
No, I'm done.
God. Good Lord. 1,000,000 degrees of separation between me and you in the US and the UK, but still managing to make these jokes. All right.
You're welcome.
Kevin, we'll just say Kevin,
Okay.
was getting ready for a date. At 5:20 p.m., his image was captured for the last time by his and Michelle's Nest doorbell camera as he walked out of his front door. Less than an hour later, he sent a text to Michelle saying he wasn't sure when he'd be home. Kevin never came home at all. When Christmas morning arrived, Kevin was not at his parents' house, and this was really uncharacteristic for Kevin. Kevin was punctual, reliable, and he kept in pretty constant contact with his family and friends. But as morning turned to afternoon, the unanswered calls and text began to mount, and this unease curdled into fear. That evening, his father, Carl Bacon, called the police and reported his son missing.
Hot Carl?
Hot Carl is another scat move. I'm not joking. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. I just know that whenever Sasha Colby wants to play Carl on Wig Loose, that Rue was like, hot Carl, and they're all joking about hot Carl. So
yeah, they're joking about
sense.
it because it's, let's see.
I'm so glad that we were able to come full circle back to scat without me even realizing.
Let's see what yourdictionary.com says about hot Carl. A hot Carl. The sexual act of defecating on the face of a sexual partner, usually while covered in plastic wrap. I think that my understanding of hot Carl is that it typically involves putting plastic wrap in the mouth and dropping the kids off at the pool in that makeshift receptacle. So there you go, hot Carl. I do want to say there is Kevin's sister had reached out to Michelle earlier in the day and said that she was hoping that he was at home with Michelle, or that Michelle maybe knew where he was or what was going on. But Michelle had no idea. And when she found out that he hadn't made it to his family's Christmas gathering, she also began to worry. So there was worries on both ends. For most, Christmas is a day of gathering. But for the family of Kevin Bacon, December 25th, 2019 became the start of a countdown. Every hour that passed deepened a horrifying certainty. Kevin hadn't just missed breakfast. He was in trouble. What they didn't know was that the man he'd gone to meet was already known to the police. To understand what happened to Kevin, we need to understand who he was. And not some idealized version, but really the full and complex person that his friends and family knew and loved. Kevin's friend Tiara Hill described him as a, quote, bright light that people just needed. He was tall, and I did not express it. This is not how I'm describing him. So I believe his friend Leandra described him as tall, bald, and expressed himself with a flair, always with his nails and makeup done. One of the pictures they show of Kevin in the docuseries that I pulled some of this information from, he has this really bright pink shimmery nail, and he's holding a cheeseburger with his hand outstretched with his nails, really serving it up to us.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah. Kevin was a talented hairstylist, a graduate of Sharp's Hair Academy, and worked at the Uniquely You salon in his hometown of Schwartz Creek. And one of Kevin's friends describes him as always liking to look his best, and he always wanted that for other people too. So it wasn't weird for him to do his friend's hair or makeup or take care of them in that way. Kevin's body also became a canvas for the things that he loved. He had tattoos celebrating Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga, and across his chest, he had the name of his idol, Jeffree Star's makeup line, Beauty Killer. He loved his cats, Smokey and Fuzzy, and his dog, Hannah. His friend Adam Cusick...
I feel like the names are backwards.
People always name their cats crazy shit, and then their dogs get a human name.
And dogs arguably should be given the crazy names, but I guess it's a name that you potentially have to shout out in public. So
Hannah, get over
is
here.
Better than
Smokey or Fuzzy.
Smokey, Fuzzy.
His friend Adam Cusick said simply that Kevin was there whenever anyone needed him. However, Kevin wasn't just joy, makeup, rainbow, and sunshine. Beneath his bright and outgoing exterior, Kevin navigated profound personal challenges. In high school, Kevin struggled to accept his sexuality, unable to admit it even to himself that he was gay. To listen to his best friend Michelle Myers speak about it is to really feel a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding, because I remember the fear of coming out and sharing. Listen, not that it was ever a secret. I was never straight passing, my God, but just the act of saying it out loud and hearing her talk about the way he struggled to accept himself took me back to a place of a lot of misery and turmoil. And it sounds like Michelle did her best to pave a way for him to feel comfortable with sharing the truth. And from what I can understand, it just kind of all happened in a day. Like a switch just flipped, and no longer did he try to hide himself or orchestrate that kind of image. Michelle had actually been his best friend since 4th grade, And she's quoted as saying, "We clicked in our weirdness together." And eventually, after coming out to Michelle and his other friends, he would come out and be accepted by his family. With this being said, Kevin did still keep many details of his, quote, dating life private from his family. Another element of shame in this story is anonymous sex and the use of apps like Grindr and other websites that are typically meant for queer men to have sexual hookups with each other. One of the things that wasn't mentioned in the docuseries that I watched was that Kevin Bacon was actually the grandson to a trans trailblazer in Michigan named Grace Bacon. In 1977, she founded Crossroads, the first support group for transgender people in the state of Michigan. She was a trailblazer who fought for the safety and acceptance of queer people. Her grandson's life, a testament to that legacy. Also, Kevin did have pictures in drag, or what I would describe as drag, but they don't ever talk about him engaging in drag. But there are times when we've got full geesh on, we've got the makeup, we've got the hair, we've got the look. And so it seems to me that he at the very least, dabbled in drag presentation, but it could have been just gender expression. The central struggle of Kevin's young adult life was a search for connection. Kevin's friend Lorraine Johnson said, quote, "Kevin was looking for love, and he wanted to be in a relationship. He wanted to be someone's person." Kevin was a self-described hopeless romantic who often put his feelings on the line, only to end up rejected, or as Lorraine said, friend-zoned. This repeated heartbreak led Kevin to seeking validation elsewhere. As his friends described it, he would, quote, "look for a quick fix on one of the sites." Those sites primarily were the queer dating app Grindr, and offered a world of anonymous encounters and the exploration of sexuality, including BDSM, a world that Kevin had begun navigating. This search for connection was shadowed by a long battle with his mental health. Early in high school, Michelle noticed that Kevin had marks on his arm from where he had cut himself. And she shared that she and some of his other friends would encourage him to get help, but Kevin's family wasn't really in a financial position to help get him mental health resources. In 2018, that struggle became acute, and Kevin sent Michelle a message after he had attempted to end his life through both cutting and an overdose. His mother later contacted Michelle to let her know that Kevin had ultimately been hospitalized. Kevin's history of depression and self-harm would become a critical, yet often misleading data point in the first hours of the investigation into his disappearance. For those who knew him, his struggles were not his defining feature. He was a son, a friend, a student, an artist. He was a young dude just looking for love and finding a place and person in this world. The plan was laid out in a series of text messages. On the afternoon of December 24th, 2019, Kevin Bacon was communicating with a man on Grindr whose profile name was Olikos. The messages detailed a BDSM roleplay scenario, and it was a script for a consensual encounter, one that required a high degree of trust. The plan dictated that Kevin would drive to a designated location, leave all of his personal belongings behind, and enter the man's vehicle. No phone, no wallet, no keys. Even his clothes were to be left behind, neatly folded in his car. This was designed to create a state of total vulnerability, a common element in certain BDSM power exchange dynamics. Like you pointed out earlier, trust is the bedrock of such encounters. The language of safety and consent is paramount. Olikos knew this and exploited it perfectly. He sent Kevin a message designed to disarm him, a performance of care and responsibility. He wrote, quote, "I will show you how I'm going to transport you and let you determine if I'm trustworthy. You will see that I'm concerned about your safety and theirs."
Whose?
Exactly. We think it's intended to mean Kevin's. One of the weird things about this case is that a lot of things happened very, very quickly. And I'm going to go over them in more detail in just a moment. but just bear with me for right now. One of the things that Olikos, okay, I want to spell it out for you. Olikos.
Olikos.
Olykos.
That changes everything.
It does. Huge changes. Kevin had sent him a text message or a message through Grindr before that, asking, "You're going to keep me safe, right?" ? And that's when Olikos responded and such. Despite his desire of connection, it's pretty clear that Kevin felt a flicker of doubt. Not only were these messages on the app or site he was using, but he had also taken screenshots of them. The last message that Kevin sent, captured in the screenshots, again, would help later guide police to his killer. And it was that simple haunting question of now, are you going to keep me safe, right?
So you said that the police were already familiar with the person responsible for Kevin not going to his family's at Christmas.
Correct.
Were they aware of his online username, screen name, or were they aware of the username and they just didn't? Which part were they aware of if they were aware of this person already?
So I included all of that information at the beginning to kind of contextualize this Olikos' role. But in this instance, there was no connection yet. They didn't know, police did not know this man by the name Olikos. It was just a screen name.
The human.
Yes.
Okay.
So they were familiar with the person himself, but not Olikos.
Right. Not his online persona.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they also weren't able to access it immediately. So those factors complicated the situation. At 5:20 p.m., Kevin walked out of his house and drove his car 1.5 miles to a strip mall parking lot near a Family Dollar. He followed the script, parked his car, took off his clothes, folded them neatly, placed them inside the vehicle along with his wallet, keys, and phone. In the critical hours after Kevin Bacon was reported missing, 2 separate but unequal investigations began. One was official, methodical, and burdened by protocol. The other was unofficial and frantic and fueled by a desperate certainty that something was terribly wrong. On Christmas Day, when Kevin's parents filed the missing person report, the initial police response was muted. Detective Sergeant Joshua Dursky of the Michigan State Police would later note that investigators considered Kevin's history of depression and the emotional weight of the holidays as potential reasons for Kevin to just be spending time alone or potentially having harmed himself. And I
was wondering if that was going to be something that was speculated because self-harm pitches up at holidays, especially Christmas, I believe.
Yeah. And that thinking itself became an impediment to the investigation in those early hours. The possibility... shockingly, I was listening to True Crime earlier, a podcast, if you will, and the hosts were talking about how, in a case that they were covering, that the sister was like, something happened to my sister. I know it's only been a few hours, but these are all the circumstances that lead me to believe that something happened. And the police were like, okay, we believe you. We'll go do a welfare check. And the podcast hosts were so baffled that the police did not try to push this person off. Mm-hmm. And it feels like, I guess when I was listening to that, I was like, what would be the harm in just doing a welfare check whenever anybody brings something like this to you? Like, why is the initial reaction to be like, well, you've got to wait, or, oh, well, that's not enough information, when I could just call and say, do a welfare check on this person. Right. And usually they'll go do the welfare check. I don't understand why when somebody thinks that there's been foul play, that they're like, oh, well, we have to wait. Oh, they could disappear on their own. Oh, Hayden just went on some super secret vacation. He'll be back in 3 days. Yeah.
Sorry. I know that was not 100% on task with the case at hand, but...
Well, no, I don't think that those exigent factors should impede an investigation from starting. I think I understand that there are protocols probably for a reason, but in this instance, I think a bit of this slowness, this inaction, could have been the difference between ultimately Kevin being with his family on Christmas and not being with his family ever again.
I guess that was kind of my takeaway is if you go and check now, you could potentially save a life, or at the very least, you could not let somebody, if there was foul play involved, you could not be, giving somebody extra time to clean up their crime or to try to distance themselves and establish an alibi or whatever the case may be. Those were just some of the thoughts that I was having when I was listening to that podcast earlier.
Investigators believed that the possibility of self-harm or that Kevin had simply left on his own was still very much a likelihood. To law enforcement, Kevin was a missing adult, not yet a confirmed victim of foul play. But to his roommate, Michelle Myers, there was no doubt. The silence from Kevin was an alarm she could not ignore. That day, she made a difficult decision. She sent a text message to Kevin's phone, a message that ultimately he would never read, apologizing for what she was about to do. Michelle then made the difficult decision to break his confidence and told his parents the truth that he had kept from them. Kevin wasn't just using these different apps for dating, but he was using them for anonymous sexual encounters. It was a painful but necessary betrayal, and ultimately it changed the trajectory of the search. That night, while most families were gathered around their Christmas trees, Michelle and Kevin's father Carl were huddled over a computer, trying to break into all of Kevin's social media and dating app accounts that they could. And between Michelle and Carl, they were actually able to develop most of his passwords and email addresses, and were actually able to get to a lot of information. The details on this next part are a little fuzzy. I'm not sure if it happened late on December 25th, that Christmas day, or early to late morning hours on the 26th. But at some point, Kevin's parents found his car in a local strip mall parking lot. And because there were so few cars out, so it must have been that night. Because it was Christmas, it was easy to find his vehicle. And when they came upon his vehicle, they noticed, like I said, the phone, wallet, keys, and his clothes inside. Michigan Police Sergeant Jim Moore described what he saw at the car as unsettling. He found it deeply unsettling that all of those items were there, and that even his clothes were neatly folded and left on the passenger seat. They didn't find it immediately, but pretty quickly into their search of the car, they did note that Kevin had left his phone in his glove box. And immediately, they noted that they would need a warrant and a forensic expert to open his phone and start going through that information. However, Michelle was able to convince the police to give her an opportunity to unlock the phone for them. And she did know the passcode. She got it right. And detectives immediately sent it off to the computer crimes unit of the Michigan State Police for immediate search, which really saved a lot of time, right? They got to bypass bureaucracy. They saved a lot of critical hours by just her being able to open his phone.
Yeah.
While the Michigan State Police computer crimes unit began extracting the data, Michelle took it upon herself, along with the Bacon family, to launch their own public campaign. They organized a search party of nearly 100 volunteers who fanned out to cover as much ground as possible. Michelle made a post on social media about Kevin's disappearance, and it ended up going semi-viral. Ultimately, a breakthrough would come on December 27th, about 60 hours after Kevin had been last seen. This breakthrough didn't come from a police database or a confidential informant, but a Facebook message. One of Michelle's Facebook friends had sent her screenshots of a conversation between two people. The messages were a chilling warning about a man on Grindr in a nearby town. Quote, "There's a guy routinely on this app. He keeps having guys escape from his basement. The cops keep not pressing charges because the guys who escaped admit that they went consensually." The message included a screenshot of the supposed man's Facebook profile. His name, Mark Latunski. Michelle forwarded these screenshots to investigators. And almost at the exact same time, the official investigation was reaching the same conclusion. The Computer Crimes Unit had found Kevin's screenshots of the Grindr conversation with Olikos and actually were able to get a copy of Olikos's profile picture from those screenshots and sent it to the facial recognition unit in Lansing, Michigan. And the results had come back. The man who was only known as Olikos was actually Mark Latunski. These two investigations running in parallel ended up at the same conclusion at very much nearly the same time. On December 28th, 2019, 3 days after Kevin had been reported missing, Michigan State Police Trooper Robert Viviano drove to the address for Mark Latunski in Morris, Michigan. It was the second time in a month he had been called out to Mark Latunski's home. When Latunski answered the door, he was shirtless, wearing only a leather kilt, and holding a small dog with a pink bow in its hair. Viviano would later say the scene reminded him of Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, saying that it was surreal. Viviano asked Latunski if he knew Kevin Bacon, which Latunski denied. When the trooper asked if he could search his home, Latunski's home, Latunski paused and then welcomed him inside. Viviano believed he would find Kevin alive, perhaps hiding, embarrassed to have been found. And in the docuseries episode, you can actually hear Viviano going over this idea that he really thought he was going to find him ashamed of having been missing for so long, but still there. The main floors of the home were messy, and there were scenes of the crime scene published in this docuseries. And some of the things that jumped out to me was a sex swing that had a white faux fur throw on it, which just seemed like a really gross covering for a sex swing. But I don't know anything about anything.
I came across a page on Instagram the other day, and she came across my page again today, and God, it's such a backstory. I'll probably cut some of this. It's a woman who found out while she was pregnant with her husband's second child that he was cheating on her, and so she and the nanny do a lot of filming online content, and so there are a lot of toys, and there was a sex swing, but it seems like they've put like faux fur or fur throws down and film on that, and I agree, it seems unhygienic, to probably say the least. Like, you're gonna get
bodily fluids are matting and caking,
but not even just bodily fluids. I mean, if they're putting oil on each other.
Some of the other things that were found, these pictures were kind of crazy to me because this house was a fucking mess. But it also wasn't like ghastly messy, but it was messy. And there were Viking helmets, what looked like leashes, ropes, a saddle, or like saddle parts. And you know those really big jars of dill pickles? They're like those huge big plastic jars of dill pickles. You might see them at a concession stand or a movie theater.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I don't like pickles, so I'm probably never paying much attention to them, but it looks almost like a big old barrel.
Yes.
Like a plastic barrel.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of those filled with like a white gooey lubricant that was half used.
No, I don't care for gooey.
And then
these are also words like the words that I specifically take issue with could be used to explain or to describe a delicious dessert. Like chunks. It could be an ice cream with chunks of brownie in it. It could be a gooey molten lava cake, but just generally speaking, these are not words.
In this context, it's bad.
But even out of this context, I just don't like the word chunks.
Anyway, so there was also like an assortment of what looked like menacing jock straps. It's hard to explain. Menacing. I know. They didn't look comfortable.
For the wearer?
Correct. I don't assume those jocks would have been comfortable for anybody. I digress. So Viviano, his partner was in there with him. So it was Latunski, Viviano, and Viviano's partner, who remains unnamed throughout this entire docuseries episode, and I never saw anywhere. So Viviano searches the first floor, the second floor, and then makes his way down to the basement. As he descended to the basement, one of the things that he noticed immediately was that there was a miter saw and some fresh cut wood. And as he continued to descend, for some reason, he felt the need to touch the walls of the basement. And one of the things he noticed was that the walls of the basement were room temperature, whereas on this 30 degree night in Michigan, it would have been much more likely for these basement walls to have been cool or cold to the touch. And so why are your eyes narrow? You better take it up with Viviano. I already know.
Was the basement 40 degrees?
No, but I think it would be cooler than the room air, the walls. I don't know, Cameron. I don't live in the North. I don't have a basement. I've never been in a basement. I mean, I know they kept things in root cellars because they were cold. So this makes him suspicious, and he begins to push against the basement wall panels. As the wall gave way, Viviano realized it was a secret door. As Viviano continued to move further into the room, he noted that the sight was so horrific that his first instinct was denial. He's quoted as saying to himself, "That's not real. It's like a dummy or something. It's fake." Then he said, "My sensibility got the best of me. And oh no, it's real." He had never seen anything like it. He peered back around the corner of the secret room and saw that his partner at the top of the stairs was trying to signal to him what's going on. And ultimately, Viviano gave him this kind of crossed wrist gesture, which is kind of universal cop speak for cuff him.
That checks out.
Mm-hmm. According to court documents and police reports, Kevin Bacon's naked body was hanging upside down from the rafters of the ceiling, suspended by a rope tied around his ankles. Mark Latunski was taken into custody and transported to the police station. There he confessed in what detectives would describe as a soft, matter-of-fact voice, devoid of any human emotion. That's also how I would describe it. That was listening to his confession. Mark Latunski spoke softly, to the point, and there was almost a kind of soft detachment, or a kind detachment. And it felt that it was completely incongruent with the situation itself. He admitted that he and Kevin had engaged in sexual activity in the basement room, and he then stated that he had stabbed Kevin in the back with a knife. After Kevin was dead, Latunski slit his throat. He then used the rope to hoist his body to the ceiling. The confession descended into this kind of final and unspeakable horror. Latunski told investigators that he had used the knife to cut off Kevin's testicles. He took them upstairs, cooked them, and ate them. This was not in the episode, just an FYI. This was shit that I was like, oh hell. This was details they didn't include. Mm-hmm. A forensic analyst.
Oh, they didn't include the cannibalism in their succinct 22-minute episode.
That bitch was 42 minutes. It was, listen, why would you, okay, here's the thing. What I will say for this docuseries is I think that it is meant to be an empowering perspective for the victim. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, one of the things that you see at the end of the episode is the people involved, like the police officers and friends, essentially saying that it's terrible and awful and unconscionable how their loved one died, how Kevin came to his end. But ultimately, the clues he left behind, the screenshots he had taken, helped them catch someone who very likely was going to end up a serial murderer.
Yeah.
And it's almost this kind of, I wouldn't say triumphant kind of ending, but that, well, and I hate to even say this, but maybe Kevin's death wasn't solely in vain. Maybe it served to help others from suffering the same fate. And that's how it's framed. I don't like that framing. I'm personally not a fan of that framing, but I understand the perspective.
Right, because if we were really gonna get down into the nitty-gritty of it, any of the men who escaped their screaming and then ultimately opted to not press charges, that could have not been in vain. If we're really gonna try to like pinpoint what wasn't in vain, or what you know what I mean? Like they could have caught him at that point. And then also, if you're talking about a show called How I Caught My Killer, I guess it's not as important what is done posthumously to the body, because the point is everything that led up to the killing itself. But also that just seems like an extra dark thing that it doesn't really surprise me that some TV programs would opt to not include.
The question becomes, who's served by having that knowledge known?
Right.
It doesn't do anything for Kevin. We're until the end of crime, and we do our best to be judicious in what we discuss, but it feels like something that should be included. Cannibalism is on another level, and you'll see why that's kind of important when we get to sentencing.
Yeah.
A forensic analyst would later confirm the presence. I hate this so much. A forensic analyst would later confirm the presence of Kevin Bacon's DNA in a skillet found in the home. The murder weapon, a knife found in Latunski's dresser, contained DNA from both Kevin and Mark. The medical examiner's report would later confirm that Kevin Bacon died from a sharp force injury. A toxicology report found the presence of antidepressants in his system. Detective Sergeant Joshua Dirksey, who was in the interrogation room, later reflected on Latunski's demeanor. "I've dealt with a wide range of people in my career," he said. "There's usually a little humanness, remorse most of the time. But there was nothing. He didn't think he had done anything wrong. And that was hard to understand."
Well, that can't be true. He did know that he did something wrong. He didn't feel bad about it.
Right.
He didn't feel conflicted or remorseful about it, but he knew that he did something wrong.
Well, and here's the thing. Mark Latunski argued that he didn't do anything wrong because supposedly it was Kevin's plan to die. That he wanted to have sex and then die.
Okay, and I've heard these cases before, but at the end of the day, assisted suicide is illegal in most states. You can't...
Certainly not without a physician.
Right.
Like it's medically assisted suicide.
Right. You can't help somebody die just because they say they want to die. The help that you're intended to get them is mental health help. Not, here, let me stab you in the back and slit your throat and hoist you upside down.
Yeah. Well, don't tell Mark Latunski.
I will tell Mark Latunski if I'm ever given the opportunity. Mark, if you're listening, you're wrong.
At the end of his detailed confession to murder, mutilation, and cannibalism, Mark Latunski had just one question for detectives. He wanted to know when he was going home. The arrest of Mark Latunski wasn't the end of this story, but the beginning of a protracted legal battle that would last nearly 3 years. The central question was not whether or not Mark Latunski had killed Kevin. He had confessed to that, but whether or not he was legally responsible for the act.
Yep, I knew this was coming.
On December 30th, 2019, Latunski was arraigned on charges of open murder and disinterment and mutilation of a dead body. His public defender immediately filed a notice to seek an insanity defense. Latunski had a documented and complex history of mental illness. According to court records from a prior divorce, he had been diagnosed in 2010 and 2012 with conditions including severe, recurrent, and chronic major depression with psychotic features, adjustment disorder with depression and anxiety, with paranoid schizophrenia, and borderline personality traits. That is a smorgasbord of problematic diagnoses.
Is it not smorgasbord?
That's what I said.
It isn't.
What did I say? Smorgasbord? Smorgasborg? What is it?
Yeah, you said smorgasbord.
What is it supposed to be? Smorgasbord.
I think it's smorgasbord, but I don't know anymore.
Smorgasbord. That's a hard word to say.
Yeah, and here you are.
Smorgasbord.
It does end in a D. But Smorgasburg is in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, good to know. His wife claimed that when he went off his medication, he would watch, quote, torture movies. During early court appearances, Latunski made bizarre claims, insisting he was a member of a Welsh royal family. In February 2020, he was found incompetent to stand trial and was sent to a secure psychiatric hospital for treatment. After several months, his competency was deemed restored, and legal proceedings resumed in October 2020. The prosecution, led by Shiawassee County Prosecutor Scott Kerner, built a case for first... I knew I wasn't going to get away with saying Kerner.
Kerner.
Shiawassee County Prosecutor Scott Kerner built a case for first-degree premeditated murder. They argued this was not a crime of passion or a psychotic break, but a, quote, cold crime of cold calculation. Their evidence was damning. They had recovered internet search records from the night before the murder, showing Latunski had researched a specific type of knife. They had receipts from a Home Depot proving he had gone out and purchased that knife. Most chillingly, Latunski had told police during his confession that he had discussed buying a food dehydrator to make jerky out of Kevin's muscles. The defense countered with two main arguments. First, Latunski maintained in his confession that Kevin had asked to be killed, framing the murder as an assisted suicide. This claim was directly contradicted by the single most powerful piece of evidence from Kevin himself. His final text saying, "You are going to keep me safe, right?" Second, Latunski's attorneys argued that his severe mental impairment meant he could not have formed the requisite intent for first-degree murder. They pointed to the fact that he willingly led police into his home, knowing that a mutilated body was hanging in his basement, as proof that he, quote, did not measure the consequences at all. But this act could also be interpreted not as a sign of insanity, but of a profound and sociopathic arrogance. Having twice before faced police after terrorizing men in his home and suffering no consequences, Latunski may have believed he was untouchable, that this was just another situation he could explain away. In September of 2022, just weeks before his trial was set to begin, Mark Latunski, against the advice of his lawyers, pleaded guilty to all charges. The plea resolved the question of guilt, but it left the most disturbing question unanswered. Was Kevin his only victim? The two prior incidents in October and November 2019 established a clear and terrifying pattern of predatory behavior. He lured men to his isolated home for BDSM encounters, which then escalated into non-consensual imprisonment. James Carlson, the man from the October 911 call, later filed a civil lawsuit against Latunski, alleging he was chained in the basement against his will. Police have stated they believe other victims could be out there, individuals who were too afraid or ashamed to come forward. Mark Latunski wasn't just a murderer. He was very likely a serial predator, stopped only because one of his victims had the presence of mind to screenshot a conversation and a best friend who refused to believe he was just missing. Because
he was a serial predator.
He
was a serial predator.
Oh, absolutely. It is hard to believe that those two incidents that we have recorded are the only incidents in which something like that happened. I mean, from someone who has a degree in forensic psychology, those pathological behaviors build, right?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily just start at high levels and then just high levels the whole time.
Yeah, no, often there's like trial runs that happen first, right? Figuring out, fine-tuning the best way to get people to agree to go to his home and then to get into vulnerable positions, and him just seeing what it is that he can get away with those people, and then it usually would then escalate. It would build. It would grow to be whatever it was that he was intending it to be. And I mean, the fantasies, right? He was fantasizing, and he's trying to bring to life the fantasy so that he can seek whatever gratification they would bring.
It stands to reason he had trial runs before the ones that we know of. Is that what you're essentially telling me? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because Mark pleaded guilty to open murder, it was left to a judge to determine the degree of his crime. After a 2-day hearing in October of 2022, where the full gruesome details of the murder and Latunski's confession were presented, Shiawassee County Judge Matthew Stewart delivered his ruling. He found that the evidence of premeditation, the research, the purchase of the knife, the elaborate luring of the victim was overwhelming. He stated Kevin Bacon's death was Mark Latunski's design. And on December 15th, 2022, Mark Latunski was formally sentenced. Before the sentence was handed down, the court heard victim impact statements from Kevin's family read by advocates. His sister Jennifer spoke of a future stolen, of holidays and milestones that would forever be empty. His father Carl spoke of the unshakable grief that now defined their lives, and his mother Pamela addressed the killer directly. Her statement read in part, quote, "In your sick, twisted mind, you probably don't think you did anything wrong. This Christmas, I hope you suffer like we have. I hope you feel pain as you are all alone with all the years yet to come." When asked if he had anything to say, Mark Latunski simply replied no. Judge Stewart sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Addressing the Bacon family, the judge said, "I know nothing can ease your suffering, and I know that the weight of your pain is without measure. But it's my hope that perhaps today's sentence will be a small amount of comfort in what I know is an enormity of hurt." In the aftermath of Kevin's murder, his community rallied. His personal idol, makeup mogul Jeffree Star, heard about the case and donated $20,000 to his family to help cover the funeral expenses. The University of Michigan Flint, where Kevin had just been shy of finishing his studies, posthumously awarded him his college degree. And advocacy groups like Equality Michigan used the tragedy to issue urgent reminders about safety protocols for online dating, encouraging users to meet in public places and use location sharing services. The legacy of this case is complex. It is a story of individual evil, of a man whose violent fantasies, fueled by severe mental illness, were allowed to fester until they exploded into reality. But it is also a story of systemic failure. The murder of Kevin Bacon was preventable. The warning signs weren't just present, they were screaming. 2 men fled Mark Latunski's home in the months prior, one of them calling 911 while holding the very knife he used to free himself. The system's failure to act on those warnings, a failure likely compounded by the stigma surrounding BDSM and queer hookups that made the victims reluctant to press charges, left a predator free to kill. In a press conference after the horrific details were released, Kevin's father, Carl Bacon, tried to make sense of the senselessness. "Evil does exist," he said, "and it touched us." And that's the story of Kevin Bacon.
It was a very tragic, sad story for, well, Kevin, his friend, and his family, but at least his family and his friend were very proactive about making sure that this was addressed as soon as they realized that there was an issue.
You know, from the framing of the docuseries episode I watched, it didn't seem like Kevin necessarily had the most honest relationship with his parents. And, you know, so much so that sharing any details of the truth from his friend to his parents, she saw as a huge betrayal. Michelle thought if she shared those things, it was a betrayal to her friend. Right. And none of that mattered, because immediately when Michelle reached out to his family, his dad wasted no time. He leapt into action. He went over to their home, and he and Michelle spent hours that night on Christmas trying to get into as many of his accounts as possible to learn as much as they could. And they did not let up for a second. This investigation was relatively fast, and it was fast because of Michelle and Carl.
Right. I mean,
Not
you said
because
that he was indicted on charges 5 days after.
Right. They found him in roughly 60 hours.
Right.
But if Michelle hadn't known his cell phone password, that could have been changed to months.
Yeah.
It would have required not only getting a warrant, but then having someone come in, a forensic expert, to unlock his device somehow. All of that being said, like you were just saying, it's the doggedness of his best friend and his dad that really led to his killer being caught so quickly. And who's to say if they didn't move faster, what would they have found in Mark Latunski's home? What would they have seen?
Right.
Would a body have been there? Would there have been reason for suspicion?
You want to say yes, and you also want to say no, because in theory, I would have thought that the body would have been gone by the time they got there, by the time they found it there.
Him talking about potentially wanting to buy a dehydrator to turn his muscles into jerky. I can't imagine what he was doing with his body once he was deceased. And not that I want to speculate that kind of darkness. This story also harkens back for me to others like the Craigslist killer. And queer people are already in danger just because of their existence. Mm-hmm. In this episode, we discussed some difficult topics like suicide, self-harm, suicidal ideation. And just as a reminder, as you care for yourself, if you need assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to our national hotline, 988. Via phone call or text. And for those of you that have been keeping up with the saga of the LGBT exclusive portion of the hotline, there are currently legislators both within the House and Senate of the U.S. Chambers of U.S. Congress looking to create a new bill to reinstate those services. So we'll keep you updated here at Until the End of Crime. That's all we've got for this episode. Thank you for listening.
Until the next crime.
If you enjoyed listening and want to hear more, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a review.
A complete list of all sources can be found in the episode description.
Recommend us to a friend, and if you are able and willing to help us produce this podcast, sign up for our Patreon.
The link to support... Yep. The link to joining our supportive bestie tier for only $2 a month is listed in the show notes. Also, make sure you're following us at End of Crime Pod on Instagram.
Our email address is endofcrimepod@gmail.com, so feel free to reach out with questions or episode suggestions.